Grandpa Ed, you're being totally unreasonable. Megan's voice crackled through my phone, sharp with an anger I'd never heard before. I told you Professor Williams had to cancel our developmental psychology final because of a family emergency. That's why I can't give you specific details about it right now. But there was no Professor Williams at University of Texas. I'd spent 6 months investigating, and I knew every lie by heart. Megan, I said quietly, I spoke with the UT Registrar's office yesterday. You've never been enrolled there. Not for a single semester. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, you had no right to check up on me like some kind of stalker. I'm 22 years old. I had every right. I've sent you $58,400 over 4 years. Every penny of your grandmother's Social Security money. So what if I took a different path? College is a scam anyway. Derek's music is going to be huge, and I'm learning more about real life than I ever would in some boring classroom. There it was. For years of lies, stripped down to the ugly truth. My granddaughter screaming at me for discovering her theft, showing not an ounce of remorse for violating everything her grandmother had died believing in. I didn't say anything, but something inside me shifted into a gear I'd never used before. I reached for my laptop and opened my banking app. Let me tell you how this whole thing started, because the deeper you dig into someone's lies, the more you realize how long they've been laughing at you. It was Christmas morning, 2020, and snow was falling outside my Cleveland apartment like something from a greeting card. The kind of morning Catherine would have loved, back when she was still here to see them. I'd been alone for 6 months by then, still adjusting to the silence that fills a house when the person who made it home isn't coming back. The phone rang just as I was making coffee in the kitchen that still smelled faintly of her vanilla candles. Grandpa Ed. Megan's voice bubbled through the speaker, bright and warm as summer. Merry Christmas. I hope you got my card. I had gotten her card. A generic thing from the campus bookstore, but she'd written a long note inside about her classes, her professors, how much she loved Austin, how much she appreciated everything I was doing for her education. Merry Christmas, sweetheart. I settled into Catherine's chair by the window, watching neighbors emerge from their houses with snow shovels. How are your finals coming along? Oh, they went great. I think I aced my developmental psychology exam. Professor Williams said I have real potential for graduate school. Pride warmed my chest. Catherine had always said education was the one thing nobody could ever take away from you. Your grandmother would be so proud, Megan. She always believed you'd make something special of yourself. A pause. Then, I know, Grandpa. I think about her every day, especially when I'm studying. It's like I can feel her encouraging me. You know? She loved you so much, I said, my voice catching slightly. She made me promise, before she passed, that I'd help you finish school no matter what. She said you were the brightest of all her grandchildren. That means everything to me. Megan's voice softened. I know it's not easy for you financially. Mom told me about your pension, and I just want you to know how grateful I am. Every dollar you send goes directly to tuition and books. I'm being so careful with it. I looked around my modest apartment at the heater I kept set to 65 to save money, at the generic groceries I bought to stretch my budget. None of it mattered. Catherine's voice echoed in my memory. Education, Edward. It's the only real inheritance we can give them. You don't worry about that, I told Megan. You just focus on your studies. That's what your grandmother would want. I will. And Grandpa? Next semester I'm taking this amazing course on childhood development. The professor says it might even help me get into the graduate program at UT. Can you imagine? Your granddaughter with a master's degree. I can imagine it perfectly, I said, and I could. Catherine sitting in the front row at graduation, tears streaming down her face as they called Megan's name. Your grandmother always said you had the mind for it. We talked for another 20 minutes about her classes, her roommates, her plans for spring break. She painted such vivid pictures of campus life, the library where she studied until midnight, the coffee shop where she met her study group, the professor who'd become her mentor. Every detail felt real, lived in, genuine. I love you, Grandpa Ed, she said before hanging up. Thank you for believing in me. I love you too, sweetheart. Give my love to your mother. After the call ended, I sat in Catherine's chair for a long time, watching the snow fall. At 68, I didn't have many purposes left in life. But this, helping Megan become the educated woman Catherine had envisioned, this felt important. Sacred, even. I pulled out my laptop and logged into my bank account, just as I did every month. The automatic transfer was already set up, but I liked to check the balance, make sure everything was in order. $1,200. The exact amount of Catherine's Social Security check. Felt right, using her money to fulfill her dream. But now, sitting in my apartment 4 years later with that phone call from Austin Community College echoing in my ears, I was remembering Christmas morning differently. How quickly Megan had deflected when I asked about specific professors. How she'd never mentioned grades, only vague assessments of how classes went. How she'd never invited me to visit, always claiming to be too busy with studies. The evidence came together over the next 6 months like pieces of a puzzle I'd been too trusting to see. Official transcripts that showed no enrollment at University of Texas. Progress reports with the wrong university logo. Bank records showing my monthly $1,200 being deposited into an account that belonged to both Megan and someone named Derek Hernandez. I hired a private investigator to confirm what I already knew. Derek had been arrested twice for drug possession and once for theft. He and Megan lived together in a rundown apartment filled with musical equipment, guitars, amplifiers, recording gear that cost more than I made in 3 months. The investigators' photos showed them laughing on a balcony, Derek's arm around my granddaughter's waist, both of them wearing designer clothes that my pension had purchased. In one photo, Megan was holding a guitar that probably cost more than my monthly rent. But I still needed to hear it from her mouth. I needed to look into her eyes when she told me the truth. So I drove to Austin. The address she'd given me as her dorm turned out to be a complex of rundown apartments near the east side of town. Paint peeling from the walls, broken bottles in the parking lot, the kind of place where young people go when they're pretending to be artists and someone else is paying the bills. I climbed the stairs to apartment 23, my arthritic knees protesting every step. Through the thin walls, I could hear music, not practicing, but a full band rehearsal. Electric guitars and drums that had cost my pension money. I knocked. The music stopped. Footsteps approached the door, and I heard whispered voices before it finally opened. Megan stood there in clothes I'd never seen before, a vintage band t-shirt that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Jeans with deliberate holes that somehow made them more expensive, not less. Her hair was dyed purple now, styled in a way that suggested regular salon visits. Behind her, I could see the apartment. Musical equipment everywhere, expensive microphones hanging from professional stands, guitars mounted on walls like art pieces. A recording setup that belonged in a professional studio, not a college student's dorm room. Grandpa Ed. Her voice cracked slightly. What are you doing here? I came to see your dorm room, I said quietly. Your mother told me you were having trouble with your roommate. I thought maybe I could help sort things out. She glanced back into the apartment, where I could see a young man with tattoo sleeves watching us from behind a drum kit that probably cost more than my car. This isn't really a good time, she said, not meeting my eyes. We're in the middle of recording and... Recording. I stepped closer to the doorway, forcing her to either let me in or physically block my path. I thought you were studying for finals. Didn't you say you had a developmental psychology exam this week? The color drained from her face. That's next week. This is just... Derek's band needed a place to practice, and my roommate said it was okay if they used our common room. Derek. The name from the bank records, from the arrest reports, from the investigators' photos. I looked past her at the young man behind the drums, who was now standing up, all 6 feet of him covered in tattoos that suggested a familiarity with the inside of police stations. Can I come in? I asked. I'd like to meet Derek. Megan's hands fluttered nervously at her sides. Actually, Grandpa, I think it would be better if we went somewhere else to talk. Maybe that coffee shop you like? We could catch up properly, and I could tell you all about my classes. I'd rather talk here, I said, and stepped past her into the apartment. The smell hit me first, marijuana and incense, But underneath that, the unmistakable scent of money being burned. Professional equipment everywhere, clothing with tags still attached, takeout containers from restaurants I couldn't afford to walk past. Derek approached us with the swagger of someone who'd never worked an honest day in his life. "You must be Megan's grandfather. She talks about you all the time." I shook his hand, noting the softness of palms that had never held a tool or lifted anything heavier than a guitar pick. "Derek, is it? What do you study at UT?" He exchanged a quick glance with Megan. "I'm actually taking a gap year, focusing on my music. Education is important, but so is following your passion, you know." "I see." I looked around the apartment again, at equipment that represented years of my pension payments. "And Megan, how are your psychology classes going?" The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. I could see her trying to formulate an answer, the same way I'd watched her practice lies as a child when she'd broken something and didn't want to get in trouble. "Grandpa," she finally said, "maybe we should sit down." We sat on a couch that was nicer than anything in my apartment. Megan perched on the edge of the cushion like she might need to run, while Derek lounged against a wall beside his expensive drum kit. "I need you to tell me the truth, Megan," I said. "And I mean the complete truth. Not another story about classes and professors and study groups." She took a deep breath, and for a moment, I thought I might see some remorse, some acknowledgement of what she'd done. Instead, she lifted her chin with the defiance I remembered from her teenage years. "Traditional college is outdated, Grandpa. I'm getting a real education here, learning about life and art and what really matters. Derek is incredibly talented, and supporting his vision is way more valuable than sitting in some boring lecture hall memorizing textbook facts." The words hit me like a physical blow. 4 years of sacrifice, $58,000 of Catherine's memory. Also, my granddaughter could play house with a wannabe musician who'd never held a job. "Supporting his vision," I repeated slowly. "With my money." "It's not just about money," Derek interjected, his voice carrying the lazy confidence of someone who'd never been told no. "It's about investing in art, in culture, in something that actually matters instead of corporate brainwashing." I turned to look at him fully for the first time. 25, maybe 26, with the kind of thin build that suggested he'd never done physical labor. Tattoos that had cost more than I made in a month. Teeth that spoke of good dental care and parents who'd paid for orthodontics. "And what exactly have I been investing in?" I asked. Derek gestured around the apartment like he was showing off a palace. "Look around, man. This is a professional recording studio. We're working on an album that could change everything. Music that speaks to people's souls, not just some manufactured pop garbage." "Derek's incredibly gifted," Megan added, her voice taking on a dreamy quality that made my stomach turn. "He's written over 30 songs. They're deep, meaningful. Not like anything you hear on the radio." I nodded slowly, as if I were considering this seriously. "And how much of my pension money has gone into this investment?" They exchanged another glance. Derek straightened up slightly, and I caught something calculating in his expression. "Look, Edward, can I call you Edward? I know this might seem unconventional from your generation's perspective, but the old model of education is broken. College is just a way to saddle young people with debt while teaching them nothing useful about the real world." "The real world," I said. "Is that what this is?" "Exactly." Derek warmed to his subject, apparently mistaking my calm tone for interest. "Out here, we're learning about creativity, about collaboration, about building something meaningful. Megan's learning more about psychology and human nature through our music than she ever would in some sterile classroom." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot where my 15-year-old Corolla sat next to Derek's newer Honda Civic, the Honda that my money had probably helped finance. "Megan," I said without turning around, "do you remember what your grandmother used to say about education?" "Grandpa, please don't make this about Grandma Catherine. She would have understood that times change, that there are different paths to learning." I turned back to face her. "Your grandmother worked 2 jobs to put herself through nursing school. She cleaned offices at night and took classes during the day. She graduated summa cum laude at age 34, the first person in her family to finish college. Megan's jaw tightened. That was her choice. This is mine. And she made me promise on her deathbed that I would help you get the education she always dreamed of giving you herself. I am getting an education. Megan's voice rose, taking on the petulant tone she'd used as a teenager when caught shoplifting candy. Just because it's not in some stuffy classroom doesn't mean it's not real learning. Derek stepped forward, putting his arm around Megan's shoulders in a gesture that was clearly meant to stake his claim. Edward, I respect what your wife wanted, I really do. But you have to understand that Megan is an adult now. She gets to choose her own path. I studied his face, memorizing every detail. The slightly receding hairline he tried to hide under carefully styled hair. The small scar above his left eyebrow. The way his eyes didn't quite meet mine when he spoke. You're absolutely right, I said finally. She is an adult. And adults face the consequences of their choices. Something in my tone must have warned them, because Derek's arm tightened around Megan's shoulders, and she leaned into him like a child seeking protection. What do you mean? She asked. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the photos the private investigator had taken. Derek and Megan at an expensive restaurant, laughing over drinks that cost more than I spent on food in a week. Megan modeling a leather jacket that probably cost $600. Derek loading new guitar equipment into his Honda, while Megan watched admiringly from the passenger seat. I mean, I said, showing them the photos, that the gravy train just pulled into its final station. Derek's face went pale under his carefully maintained tan. Look, man, I don't know what you think you know, but I know that you've been arrested twice for drug possession and once for theft. I know that neither of you has ever been enrolled at University of Texas. I know that every dollar I've sent for 4 years has gone into this fantasy life you've built together. Megan's composure finally cracked. Grandpa, you don't understand. I was going to tell you eventually, when Derek's music took off. When we could pay you back everything with interest. When his music took off, I repeated. And how exactly was that going to happen? Derek straightened up, apparently deciding to brazen it out. We're close to getting a record deal. There are some industry people interested in our sound. It's just a matter of time before. Before what? Before you become the next big thing and shower me with royalty checks. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Do you have any idea how many wannabe musicians say exactly those words every single day? This is different, Megan insisted. Derek's music is special. You just don't understand because you're from a different generation. I looked at her for a long moment. This young woman I'd loved and supported and believed in for 22 years. You're right. I don't understand. I don't understand how you could lie to me for 4 years. I don't understand how you could use your grandmother's memory to steal from me. And I don't understand how you can stand there with no remorse, no shame, no recognition of what you've done. I haven't stolen anything. Megan's voice cracked. You gave me that money. You wanted to help with my education. Your education, I said. Not his hobby. Derek stepped forward. His chest puffed out in a way that might have been intimidating to someone who hadn't spent 40 years dealing with angry customers at the post office. Hey, old man, you need to watch how you talk about my music. This isn't some hobby. This is my life's work. I looked at him with the same expression I'd used to examine a piece of junk mail before throwing it away. Your life's work, built entirely with stolen money from a 68-year-old widower. It wasn't stolen, Megan said, but her voice had lost its defiant edge. I was going to pay you back. We both were. When things turned around for us. When things turned around, I repeated. Let me ask you something, Derek. In the 4 years you've been working on your life's work, how much money have you made from your music? He shifted uncomfortably. Art isn't about money, man. It's about creating something meaningful, something that connects with people's souls. That's not what I asked. How much money have you made? A longer pause. The music industry is really complicated right now. With streaming and everything, it's hard for independent artists to. 0, I said. You've made $0 in 4 years, which means every penny you've spent on equipment, on this apartment, on clothes and restaurants and whatever else, has come from my pension and my dead wife's social security. The silence in the room was deafening. Through the thin walls, I could hear a television playing in another apartment, normal people living normal lives with normal problems. "We're going to pay you back," Megan said finally, her voice small now. "I promise, Grandpa. Every penny." "With what money?" "I'll get a job. Derek can get a job. We'll figure it out." I looked around the apartment one more time, at the expensive equipment that had never earned a dime, at the lifestyle built entirely on lies and stolen dreams. "You're absolutely right," I said. "You will figure it out. Starting immediately." Derek's face darkened. "What's that supposed to mean?" I didn't answer him. Instead, I looked directly at Megan. "For years ago, your mother called me crying because you needed help with college. She said you'd been accepted to UT but couldn't afford the tuition. She begged me to help, knowing how much your grandmother wanted you to get an education." "Mom was just trying to help," Megan said quickly. "She knew how important education was to you and Grandma Catherine. Your mother knew exactly what you were planning, didn't she?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Megan's eyes darted to Derek, then to the floor, then back to me. "She didn't know about Derek at first," she said finally. "That part just happened. But she knew you weren't going to college." A longer pause. "She knew I was thinking about taking a different path. And she helped you lie to me for 4 years so you could steal my pension money." "It wasn't like that." Megan's voice rose again. "Mom was just trying to protect everyone. She knew you'd be upset if you thought I wasn't following Grandma Catherine's plan exactly. So instead of being honest, she decided to help you commit fraud." Derek stepped forward again. "Look, Edward, I think you're being a little dramatic here. Nobody intended to hurt you. Things just evolved differently than anyone expected." I turned to face him fully. "Derek, I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. In about 10 minutes, I'm going to walk out of this apartment. After that, every aspect of the comfortable life you've built with my money is going to disappear. Not gradually, not over time. Immediately." His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that your free ride just ended." I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. "I'm canceling the automatic transfer that's been funding your little fantasy for 4 years. No more $1,200 a month. No more equipment money. No more rent money. No more food money." Megan grabbed my arm. "Grandpa, please. You can't just cut us off without warning. We have bills, we have commitments." I gently removed her hand from my arm. "The same way you had commitments to me, the same way you honored the trust one placed in you." "That's different," Derek said. "You can afford to help us. Look at this place, look at how we're living. We're not exactly rolling in luxury here." I gestured around the apartment at the thousands of dollars worth of equipment. "This is what poverty looks like to you? Professional recording gear and designer clothes and restaurant meals every night." "It's not about the money," Megan said desperately. "It's about supporting each other. About family helping family achieve their dreams." Family. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. Is that what we are? Because family members don't usually lie to each other for 4 years straight. Derek's demeanor was shifting now, the laid-back musician persona giving way to something sharper, more desperate. "Look, old man, I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but Megan and I have built a life together. You can't just waltz in here and destroy it because you're having some kind of senior moment." The insult hung in the air between us. I felt something settle in my chest, cold and final as winter. "A senior moment," I repeated. "Is that what this is?" "Derek, don't," Megan whispered, but it was too late. "Yeah, that's what this is," Derek continued, apparently mistaking my calm tone for weakness. "You're some lonely old man who's jealous that your granddaughter has found happiness without you. So you're throwing a tantrum and threatening to take your ball and go home." I nodded slowly, as if considering his words seriously. "You might be right. I might be having a senior moment. Let me ask you something, Derek. In your professional opinion as a musician and philosopher, What would be the appropriate response when an old man discovers that his family has been stealing from him for 4 years? I don't know, maybe try to understand that people change? That life doesn't always follow the script you write for it. Interesting perspective. I put my phone away and started walking toward the door. I'll definitely take that under consideration. Where are you going? Megan called after me. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. Home. To have that senior moment Derek mentioned. Grandpa, please, she said. And for the first time, I heard real fear in her voice. Can't we talk about this? Can't we work something out? I turned back to look at her one last time. Standing there in her expensive clothes, surrounded by equipment bought with stolen money, begging me to continue funding her lies. We just did, I said, and walked out. The drive back to Cleveland gave me 18 hours to think, 18 hours to plan, 18 hours to let the reality of what I discovered settle into my bones like arthritis. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't call Jennifer to scream at her for her part in the deception. Instead, I drove through the night and calculated. For years, $58,400. Catherine's Social Security money, intended to honor her memory by educating our granddaughter. By the time I reached my apartment, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I started with the bank. The automatic transfer that had drained my account for 4 years was canceled with a simple phone call. The customer service representative was polite, efficient, asked no questions about why a 68-year-old man was suddenly cutting off payments to Austin, Texas. Effective immediately, I confirmed when she asked about the timing. Next, I opened my laptop and began documenting everything. The private investigator's report with photos and criminal background checks. The bank statements showing exactly where my money had gone. The fake transcripts Megan had sent me, complete with forged university logos and fictional professor names. The real transcripts from University of Texas showing no enrollment record for any Megan Walsh. I organized it all into a neat folder, the same way Catherine used to organize our tax documents. Methodical, thorough, unassailable. Then I made a list of phone numbers. Jennifer first, then my other children, then Catherine's sister Margaret, then my brother Robert. Everyone who would be attending Catherine's annual memorial dinner in 3 weeks. But I didn't call anyone yet. Instead, I sat in my apartment and waited. The first call came at 11:30 that evening. Megan, her voice shrill with panic. Grandpa Ed, I just tried to pay our rent and the bank said the transfer was declined. There must be some kind of mistake. No mistake, I said calmly. I canceled the automatic transfer this afternoon. You can't do that. We have bills. We have commitments. The same way I had commitments to Catherine's memory? A pause. Then, in a smaller voice, please, Grandpa. I know you're upset, but we can work this out. I can start paying you back little by little. I'll get a job. What kind of job, Megan? What skills do you have? What education? What work experience? Silence on the other end of the line. For years, I continued, for years you could have been learning something, becoming someone, building a real life instead of this fantasy. And now you want me to continue funding it while you figure out how to join the real world. It's not a fantasy. Her voice cracked. Derek's music means something. We're building something real here. Then build it with your own money. We don't have any money. You know that. Exactly. I hung up and turned off my phone. The next morning, Jennifer called the landline I kept for emergencies. Her voice was tight with controlled anger. Dad, what the hell do you think you're doing? Good morning, Jennifer. How are you? Don't give me that. Megan called me crying last night. She said you found out about the college thing and cut off her funding. The college thing, I repeated. Is that what we're calling fraud now? Oh, please, don't be so dramatic. So she took a different path than expected. You act like she murdered someone. I sat down at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, settling in for what I knew would be a long conversation. Jennifer, I want you to tell me something honestly. When you called me 4 years ago, begging me to help with Megan's college expenses, did you know she had never been accepted to University of Texas? A pause that lasted too long. I knew she was exploring different options. Did you know she was living with a boyfriend who had been arrested for drug possession and theft? People change, Dad. People make mistakes when they're young. Did you know that every dollar I sent was going to fund their fantasy life instead of education? It's not a fantasy. Jennifer's voice rose. Derek is incredibly talented. His music could really take off if he just gets the right break. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. You actually believe that, don't you? You actually think some record executive is going to discover this kid and make him the next big thing? Stranger things have happened. Jennifer, I want you to listen very carefully. Your daughter has been lying to me for 4 years. You've been helping her. Together, you've stolen nearly $60,000 from me. Money that was supposed to honor your mother's memory by giving Megan the education Catherine always wanted for her. Stolen is a strong word, Dad. You gave that money willingly. I gave it for college tuition, not for musical equipment and restaurant meals and designer clothes. Look, I know this isn't what Mom had in mind originally, but times change. The traditional path isn't for everyone. Megan is finding her own way, and that should be enough. I set down my coffee cup, my hand steadier than it had been in months. Your mother made me promise on her deathbed that I would help Megan get an education. She made me swear that I wouldn't let our granddaughter end up like she did, working 2 jobs, struggling for every opportunity, fighting for respect in a world that didn't value her intelligence. Mom would have understood. Your mother would have been ashamed, I said, cutting her off. Ashamed that her granddaughter threw away the opportunity Catherine never had. Ashamed that her daughter helped orchestrate the betrayal. Ashamed that the money she earned cleaning offices and working double shifts was spent on lies. Jennifer's voice went cold. You're being unreasonable. Megan is 22 years old. She gets to choose her own path, even if it's not the one you and Mom mapped out for her. You're absolutely right. She does get to choose. And I get to choose whether or not to fund those choices. She needs that money, Dad. They both do. Derek is on the verge of a breakthrough with his music. All he needs is a little more time to get established. How much time, Jennifer? Another 4 years? Another $60,000? How long am I supposed to subsidize this delusion? It's not a delusion. But even as she said it, I could hear the doubt creeping into her voice. When was the last time Derek made any money from his music? A pause. The music industry is complicated right now. With streaming and everything, it's hard for independent artists to monetize their work immediately. That's not what I asked. Has he ever made a single dollar from his music? A longer pause. Not yet, but... Not yet. 4 years and not $1. But somehow, next month or next year, everything's going to change. You don't understand how creative careers work, Dad. Success doesn't happen overnight. I understand how real careers work, Jennifer. I understand getting up every morning and going to a job, whether you feel like it or not. I understand earning money and paying bills and taking responsibility for your choices. That's such an old-fashioned way of thinking. The economy is different now. Young people have to be more creative, more entrepreneurial. Entrepreneurial, I repeated. Is that what we're calling it when someone lives entirely off stolen money from their grandfather's pension? It's not stolen. God, Dad, you make it sound like they robbed a bank. You were helping your granddaughter pursue her dreams. Her dreams? What dreams, Jennifer? To be the girlfriend of a wannabe musician who's never held a job. To be an artist. To create something meaningful instead of just grinding away in some corporate cubicle for 40 years. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where I'd lived for 23 years. Working-class people heading to working-class jobs the same way I had for 4 decades. You know what your mother's dream was, Jennifer? To see her granddaughter become an educated woman who could support herself, who could stand on her own 2 feet, who wouldn't have to depend on a man or anyone else for survival. Times are different now, Dad. Women don't have to prove themselves the same way Mom did. Different how? Because now they can choose to be financially dependent on men instead of being forced into it. Because now they have options. They can choose different paths, follow their hearts instead of just doing what's expected. Following her heart, I said. Is that what Megan is doing? Following her heart? Or following a boy who saw an easy mark? Derek loves her. Derek loves my money. The money that pays his rent and buys his equipment and funds his hobby. It's not a hobby. It's his passion. A passion that has never earned him a dime but has cost me $60,000. Jennifer went quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, less certain. What do you want from us, Dad? What would make this right? I thought about Catherine, lying in her hospital bed 3 days before she died, making me promise to take care of Megan's education. I thought about the look in her eyes when she talked about our granddaughter's potential, her hopes for the opportunities Megan would have that Catherine never did. I want you to understand what you've done, I said finally. I want you to understand that you've betrayed everything your mother stood for. I want you to understand that you've stolen money that was meant to honor her memory and used it to fund a lie. We can pay you back, Jennifer said quickly. Maybe not all at once, but over time. Megan can get a job. Derek can find work. With what skills? What experience? What education? They'll figure it out. People do. People do, I agreed. Usually when they're forced to. What does that mean? It means the funding stops now, today. No more money for rent, for equipment, for food, for anything. If they want to continue their artistic lifestyle, they can find a way to pay for it themselves. Dad, that's not fair. You can't just abandon them without warning. The same way they didn't abandon me without warning when they decided to steal from me for 4 years? I hung up the phone and went back to my preparations. Catherine's annual memorial dinner had been a tradition for 3 years now. Every December, the family gathered at Robert's house to share stories about her, to remember the woman who had held us all together. This year, I decided, would be different. I arrived early, carrying a manila folder that contained everything I'd discovered. Bank statements, private investigator reports, Derek's criminal background check, the fake transcripts with their wrong university logos. For years of lies, organized into neat, irrefutable evidence. Jennifer was already there with her husband Mark, both of them looking nervous. They'd probably spent the last 2 weeks trying to figure out how to explain the situation to the rest of the family. Dad, Jennifer approached me as I hung up my coat. Can we talk privately before everyone else gets here? We'll all talk together, I said. As a family. My other children arrived over the next hour. Robert and his wife Sarah. My daughter Patricia with her teenage twins. My youngest son Michael, who'd driven up from Cincinnati. Catherine's sister Margaret, now 81 but still sharp as a tack. The people who had loved Catherine, who had respected her, who would understand what this betrayal really meant. We sat around Robert's dining room table, the same table where Catherine had carved countless holiday turkeys, where she'd helped grandchildren with homework, where she'd planned family vacations and celebrated birthdays and anniversaries. Before we begin tonight, I said, standing up with my folder, I need to share something with everyone, something about Catherine's memory and how it's been honored. Jennifer's face went pale. Dad, maybe this isn't the time. This is exactly the time. I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. 3 years ago, I made a commitment to honor Catherine's dying wish. She made me promise to help Megan finish college, to give our granddaughter the education Catherine never had the chance to complete herself. I passed around copies of my bank statements showing the monthly transfers. For 4 years, I've sent $1,200 every month to support Megan's education at University of Texas. $58,400 total. Patricia frowned as she looked at the numbers. Dad, that's almost all of your pension income. It was Catherine's Social Security money, I said. It felt right, using her money to fulfill her dream. Margaret looked up from the bank statements. Edward, this is incredibly generous, but why are you sharing this now? I pulled out the next set of documents. Because 2 weeks ago, I discovered that Megan has never been enrolled at University of Texas. Not for a single semester. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched my family process this information, saw the confusion and disbelief spreading across their faces. That's not possible, Robert said. We've heard about her classes, her professors. All lies. I distributed copies of the official university transcripts showing no enrollment record. Every progress report, every story about campus life, every detail about her studies. Completely fabricated. Michael leaned forward, studying the documents. Then where has the money been going? I handed out the private investigator's photos. Derek and Megan at expensive restaurants, loading musical equipment, wearing clothes that cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. To fund her boyfriend's music career, I said. A young man named Derek Hernandez who has been arrested twice for drug possession and once for theft. Margaret's hand went to her chest. Oh, Edward. Oh, dear God. Jennifer. Patricia turned to her sister. Did you know about this? All eyes turned to Jennifer, who was staring at her hands. When she looked up, her face was defiant rather than ashamed. Yes, she said. I knew Megan wasn't taking the traditional college path. But that doesn't make it fraud. Times are different now. Young people have to be more creative about their careers. The room erupted. Robert's voice cut through the chaos. Creative? You call stealing from our father creative? It's not stealing. Jennifer shot back. Dad gave that money willingly. For college tuition. Patricia slammed her hand on the table. Not to fund some deadbeat's hobby. Margaret's voice, when she spoke, was quietly furious. Jennifer, your mother scrubbed floors on her hands and knees to pay for nursing school. She worked 16-hour days to give all of you opportunities she never had. And you used her memory to steal from your own father. It's not stealing, Jennifer repeated, but her voice had lost its conviction. Then what would you call it? Michael demanded. What do you call lying to someone for 4 years while taking their pension money? I held up my hand for silence. When the room quieted, I pulled out the final document. This, I said, is Derek's criminal record. 2 arrests for possession with intent to distribute. 1 arrest for theft from his previous employer. This is the artistic vision you've been asking me to fund. Robert grabbed the document, his face darkening as he read. This piece of garbage has been living off our father's pension while dealing drugs? We don't know that he's still, Jennifer started. Wake up, Patricia interrupted. Open your eyes and look at what you've done. I sat back down, watching my family grapple with the truth. This was what I'd wanted, not just for them to know about the betrayal, but to understand it viscerally, to feel the violation of everything Catherine had stood for. The money stops now, I said quietly. The transfers have been canceled. Derek and Megan are on their own. Jennifer's composure finally cracked. Dad, you can't just abandon them. They need time to adjust, to find work. The same consideration they showed me when they spent 4 years lying to my face? Margaret reached across the table and took my hand. Edward, I'm so sorry. Catherine would be heartbroken. Catherine would be ashamed, I corrected. Ashamed that her granddaughter threw away the opportunities she fought so hard to create. Jennifer stood up abruptly. I can't listen to this anymore. You're all being cruel and judgmental. Megan is finding her own path, and that should be enough. Sit down. Robert's voice was deadly quiet. You're not leaving until we finish this conversation. You can't tell me what to do. I can tell you that if you walk out that door defending this theft, you're not welcome back. Jennifer looked around the table at her family, at the faces that had once welcomed her with unconditional love, now reflecting disappointment and disgust. This is insane, she said. You're choosing money over family. No, Patricia said quietly. You chose money over family 4 years ago. We're just finally seeing it clearly. Jennifer grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Come on, Mark. We're leaving. Mark, who hadn't said a word all evening, looked torn. Jennifer, maybe we should. Now, Mark. They left, slamming the door behind them. The rest of us sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Margaret spoke. What will you do now, Edward? I gathered up the documents, putting them back in their neat folder. I'm setting up a scholarship fund in Catherine's name at Cleveland Community College. Real scholarships with verification and direct payments to the institution. Money that will actually honor her memory. Over the following months, I watched the consequences unfold from a distance. Derek left Megan within 2 weeks of the money stopping. Apparently, his artistic vision didn't extend to working actual jobs to pay rent. Megan, with no education and no work experience, ended up moving back in with Jennifer, creating tension in a marriage that was already strained. Jennifer found herself isolated from the rest of the family. Robert stopped inviting her to gatherings. Patricia wouldn't return her calls. Michael removed her from the family group chat. The social network that had sustained her for 43 years evaporated overnight. She tried reaching out to me several times, alternating between anger and desperation. "You've turned my own family against me," she accused in one voicemail. "All over money that you could afford to lose." But it was never about the money. It was about trust, about respect, about honoring the memory of a woman who had sacrificed everything for her family's future. A year later, I ran into Jennifer at the grocery store. She looked older, tired, worn down by the weight of her choices. We stood there in the cereal aisle, two people who had once shared holidays and birthdays and family jokes, now strangers connected only by blood and betrayal. "How is Megan?" I asked. Jennifer's shoulders sagged. "She's working at a call center, barely making ends meet. She talks about going back to school, but..." She shrugged helplessly. "And Derek? Gone. Has been for months." Her voice was bitter. "Turns out his artistic vision required a steady income stream." I nodded, feeling no satisfaction in being right. "I'm sorry it worked out this way, Jennifer. Are you?" She looked at me with eyes that held 4 decades of shared history and recent pain. "Because it feels like you planned this. Like you wanted us to suffer." "I wanted you to understand consequences," I said. "I wanted you to learn what happens when you violate trust." "Well, congratulations. Lesson learned." She turned to walk away, then stopped. The Catherine Walsh Memorial Scholarship helped 12 students last year. I looked it up online. I watched her disappear around the corner, pushing her cart toward a future that would be lonelier and harder than the one she'd thrown away. That evening, I sat in Catherine's chair by the window, holding the thank you letters from scholarship recipients. 12 young people who were getting the education Catherine had dreamed of, earned through honest work and genuine commitment. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's about letting them destroy themselves while you build something better from the ashes of their betrayal. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions in the comments below.